check.
Check. One of the greatest threats would be radioactive fallout.
Uranium fever.
Where fallout is heaviest, it can even kill those who have not taken proper shelter.
Broadcasting deep underground in a questionably constructed survivalist bunker is Dave Chaffins and Kenneth Vigue, and your host, as always, Mr. Robots. This episode of the Fallout Hub is brought to you by the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Open enrollment for advanced robotics courses starts now. Totally nothing sketchy going on. Nope, not at all.
Vault Dwellers, Wastelanders, it is time again for, well, let me just pause there. This is a dual episode. This is both the Fallout Lorecast and the Fallout Hub happening at the same time. This episode will be released on both feeds for you to enjoy with your ear holes. And you might be looking at the screen right now during the live stream of this or on the YouTube video of this and wonder what is going on with these different faces. Well, I have, as usual, for the Fallout Lorecast, my daughter Lainey. Lainey, welcome. How's it going? And good. And also, as usual, from the Fallout Hub, Ken. Ken, what's up? How's it going? Ken, everybody's creepy today. Nobody's talking and everybody's just like smiling and waving at the camera. So this is an audio platform, friends, so we will need to use words, human English words, most likely, as opposed to like other languages or other animals speaking, so no barking or whatever a giraffe says. But welcome everybody back to the show. This the reason why we're doing this for this episode is because our friend Kennethy here, and that is your full name, right? Kennethy?
Yes.
Kennethy. Kennethy here has been delving, that's probably a good term, delving into the situation with the mole miners. He's been digging around.
Situation with the mole miners.
The casual situation with the mole miners. Been digging around in the depths of the mines where the mole miners are to discover some very interesting details about the mole miners that we, until now, I don't know that anybody other than say the developers were really aware of. This is very new to me. What do you think?
I think this was one of those things, and we'll get into why, that just kind of was an obvious thing that was there that people didn't really put together for a number of reasons.
Yeah, so thus we have an episode that makes sense for both the Lorecast, because we're talking about the lore of the mole miners, and for the Fallout Hub, because we're talking about Fallout 76. So we decided we're going to double this up. We're going to do a double episode. So as always, if you are interested in tuning into this show as the Fallout Hub live, we are live right now on twitch.tv/the Fallout Hub on Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific. If you would like to tune in to the Fallout Lorecast at a regular time, you wouldn't have been able to last night because we were delaying till today, but you can check that out at twitch.tv/robotsradio on Monday nights, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. So let's get into it, Ken. What kinds of first of all, what sent you down this mine shaft? We'll call it.
Before I get to that, let me ask you, what was your first experience with a mole miner?
It was a drunken night. I was feeling alone, and I was
we all do things in college
trying out a bar I'd never been to before. Met a sweet little mole miner woman. She leaned over while I was drinking alone at the bar, and she went, and I knew right then that the rest of my night would not be a normal night.
Kids in chat, you know you found love when she leaves a rolling pin, a furious rolling pin.
A furious rolling pin.
2-star useless rolling pin on the nightstand. She leaves with your heart in the pouring rain.
Yeah. So my real first experience, not the imaginary one that I tell myself. I'm trying to remember back, because now we're thinking back, way back to when this game first came out, and I was probably in my mid-teen levels, probably a few hours into the game, doing some questing in the ash heap area, probably, right? I probably stumbled upon them in the remains of like a industrial site somewhere before going down into a mine. I don't think I was in a mine the first time I ran into them. And I don't have a clear memory of it, but I do think I probably saw something moving around in the distance that looked like this big old hunched over lump of a thing. And then I got closer and heard, which is one of my favorite sounds to make.
Could you, what was that? I didn't hear it.
That's
That's what I thought you said.
Yeah. Little known fact, I did all of the mole miner sounds. I did all the voiceover work for them in the game, and then they scrapped that and they went with the people who actually did them.
Tom just violated a major NDA.
A major NDA.
My experience was pretty similar. I had found out where, I mean, this is like the Wild West days of 76 kids. You weren't hopping all over the map like some kind of
back when I was your age.
wackadoo. I don't know what that word is, but it's the word.
Yeah, no wild wackadoo. No human beings to talk to tell you where to go next.
It was area chat was always on, so you could hear couples arguing over.
Oh, dude, I remember this.
Over what pizza topping or who was going to get tied up that evening. That's a true story.
Or some kids. Yeah, or some kids. Well, yeah, well, there you go. Or some kid's mom saying, what are you doing over there? Turn that game off. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I headed down to go after the excavator armor, and that's where I first encountered them. And it was the same kind of thing. They're just really jarring. And not only do they just start shooting at you, at some point they just kind of get frustrated and they just come charging at you, all fists or claws. And it's just kind of, it's unsettling, really, in a frightening way. So, all you hear is what Tom just did. Now, mind you, there were some evenings where I had quite a lot to drink, and in a very stream of consciousness clarity that often only comes when you've had a lot to drink. You met
the same lady I did at the bar.
I met the same lady that Tom did, and she left with my heart, and she left me a rolling pin as well.
And a rolling pin. She brings rolling pins to leave.
She does. That's all. She gives out crap.
It's her mark. She bakes well too. She uses them to bake first. She also leaves cookies with them. She leaves the cookies and the rolling pin.
Before the war, she was Betty Crocker. There's some.
This is what happens.
Some deep lore for you.
This is now we know. This is what happens to Betty Crocker.
You should see what happened to Mama Celeste. That's no scorched beast queen.
I've been watching a lot of baking shows on Netflix and stuff lately. Now in my own headcanon, all of the mole miners are all former contestants on the British baking show.
I thought they were former contestants on The Price is Right. Like you get to a point where you never get the final showcase and you're just angry about it.
Yeah, I think there's kind of a Venn diagram somewhere where there's a crossover. It's pretty significant, I would imagine.
I think we're
anyway. Go on. Let's get back to the topic here.
So bearing all of that in mind, on some evenings, I would think that I heard them say something specific. You just kind of discard it and you don't really think about it or dwell on it. For the most part, because of their appearance, you think that at one point they were human, but we grow up in an era where we've seen a lot of horror movies about inbred humans living in caves and whatnot, that just sort of terrorizes people. Particularly in the case,
my favorite subgenre is inbred humans in caves.
That's a whole Netflix category. I highly recommend.
Have you watched? Lainey's a fan of that stuff too. Those are her favorite.
In caves?
Yeah, inbred. That's your favorite subgenre of horror, right, Lainey? So a little bit of background. Lainey did film studies, and she was in a very special program, a very special high school program, and she did film studies. That was her specialty. Cool. Yeah, 4-year film studies, and all of her films she did were inbreds in caves. She did like an entire series. If you look up actually that's the name of the series, Inbreds in Caves. There's Inbreds in Caves 1, Inbreds in Caves 2, Double Bred, Inbreds in Caves 3. We're back again, MFers. Yeah, I don't know how you got away with that title in high school, but
It was rough. Lots of back and forth with the teacher. Didn't fly in film festivals.
It's unfortunate.
It's a spelunking elective right there.
Yep. All right, so go on.
Yeah, so when you think about West Virginia, a lot in the horror movie genre, I think we're programmed to look at anything in that degree that has that amount of animal ferocity with lacking common human traits. So they're not exactly empathetic. You just kind of kill them on sight. You don't really dwell on it. The horror movie that came out called Wrong Turn actually did a great disservice to Appalachia, who for a very long time now has had the misconception that it is not only one of the poorest regions in the country, but that inbreeding is kind of run amok. In the middle part of the 20th century, it got to the degree that there were some studies done and even some highly questionable programs that paid men to become sterilized under a program that focused on eugenics. It's a debunked scientific theory from a very dark period of our history that Hitler, of all people, was a proponent of. It's basically selective breeding of what's considered superior genes or superior traits.
Right. I saw, and I shared on my Facebook profile recently, a study that they did trying to determine. There have been studies that determine like the earliest common ancestor of, say, all humans. Well, they did a study that was like the earliest common ancestor of like specific like gene. So it's complex. If you have two parents and they both provide their genes to a child, and then two more parents and they provide their genes to a child, some of those genes get passed on, some of them don't. So you may not have any genes from a specific parent. Anyway, there's a whole thing about this. And then the process of, if you have two parents, you have 4 grandparents, you have 8 great-great-grandparents, you have 16, and the numbers get up really, really big. So it turns out that if you go back, I think it's no more than, like, if you're of European lineage, you go back 1,000 to 1,000 AD, and everybody shares all of the same ancestors. Nobody born before 1,000 AD in Europe has genes that didn't get passed down to all of us, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And if you look at the entire population of the world, it was only roughly 2,000 BCE or 1,500 BCE at the latest that we all share genes. So you're not looking hundreds of thousands of years for a common gene ancestor. It's actually only about 3,000 years ago. So all humans who are currently on the planet all can trace back to everyone or a specific group of population that lived 3,000 years ago, no matter how different we look or where we live now. It's amazing to think about how closely we are connected to each other.
There was a period in the
Amazing is one
90s,
word for it.
where I shared genes. I had Janko genes. You could fit multiple people in there.
That's true. Yeah, if they had those back in 3,000 years ago, you would have fit everybody that you're related to all in the same pair of Janko genes.
I'm pretty sure they did.
Mm-hmm.
But
go on.
So the misconception that there's a variety of people disproportionately living in Appalachia that is inbred mutant monsters has proven to not be true. In fact, of all places, Washington State has the highest amount of inbreeding in any of the states, which is not something that's talked about. But yeah, but there's a historical lineage. Part of it is the misconception that was put forth by oil barons, the tycoons of the last century, that basically robbed Appalachia of its heritage, its natural minerals, the Rockefellers, the coal and oil barons and whatnot. So
oil barons.
When you raise people in an environment, you keep them impoverished to keep the money flowing in, as opposed to make them sympathetic. you create this storyline that they're essentially all a bunch of hillbilly inbreds, which couldn't be further than the truth. I raise all of that because I think all of us, when we think of hillbilly, we think of Appalachia, we think about how poor it is and inbreeding and those horror movies and all of that. So all of these things kind of shape our perception, I think, of the mole miners, which we know are pre-war. They were humanoid at one point. Talking a little bit about what they are. So they are human. They are mutated. In the loading screens, it describes them that they're trapped within their mining suits. So they can't get out of these things. It's essentially fused to them. So they can't.
Yeah,
escape
that was
if
the
they
impression
want
I
to.
had, was that they'd kind of bonded with their mining suits. Something had happened through radiation or mutation or whatever that bonded them to the suits, the very suits that they're in, that are now part of kind of who they are.
Right, exactly. They can't get out of that. So it's like Darth Vader on steroids, because there's a whole bunch of them, not just one person.
Yeah.
But they're highly violent. They'll attack anything that they perceive as a threat. And I'm going to come back to that because that word is actually really important. When you do the Lost and Found quest, that's the repeatable quest. You find keys on one of their bodies. So you go to their locker that they had before they became this, hulking monstrosity, and retrieve some valuables that were left in there from when they were workers before the war. Also in Uranium Fever, as you're going through doing that event, the automated system will recognize former supervisors, and will let you know that they're terminated management and should be killed on site. Which is impressive because the system is still able to recognize them in some fashion, even though they're kind of these mutated monstrosities.
I wonder if it's a gene scan. I mean, obviously their genes would be mutated, but I don't know. There's something there, right?
They're
recognizing something.
For them to recognize it. They also keep mole rats as domesticated pets, which is interesting. Which also,
yes, I love this.
It demonstrates that they have human traits, where they not only have friendships, and I'm going to talk about that a little later. They also have mole rats that they hang around with as pets. In fact, now with Wastelanders, there's a random encounter you'll come across where raiders are battling some mole miners, and there's a triggered line that one of them will say that they say they keep mole rats as pets. That's weird. In ancient times, some of the first peoples domesticated wolves, and that's where dogs come from. So there's this kind of there's some real human traits to them, aside from the fact that all we can do is hear them scream. Yeah, I mean, we know them as hulking monstrosities that are screaming into a pasta strainer.
Pasta strainer, yes.
I mean, there's a few exceptions. You have Mother Murmurg, that for whatever reason is not only passive, but she took it upon herself to dig up from the ground, and then go build the script machines for us, and then set herself up as a legendary purveyor, originally at Berkeley Springs, and then she relocated to the Rusty Pick and picked up.
Maybe she's the one that left the bowling pin and the cookies.
There's nothing better than Mama Murmurg's cookies.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying?
Mama Murmurg. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
She's a real hero, though. I appreciate her efforts.
She is. I mean, she's tortured, and yet she has like this zen-like stake of judging you. So you walk up to her with your script, you sashay up there, and you're like, "Hey, Mama, I heard you having a sale today, girl. Here's my script.
Hey,
lay it on
what
me.
You got behind the counter, lady? Let me have a look-see."
And she's like, what's that? All Ghoul Slayer stuff? Here you go. Here's a bowling pin. Yeah. Here's a boxing glove. Here's a white ivory grip. And then every now and then she'll grace you with something good. She'll say, "You know what, kid? You've been through enough. Here you go. Here you go. +1 strength god tier roll meat hook," like she did.
Yeah. Here's a bloodied avoiding armor, plus strength cleaver of some sort, or whatever.
Every now and then she'll grace you.
You're like, oh, great.
She's got a little friend that hangs around with her down there in the basement. And as yet, it looks like there's a tunnel system underneath there that connects to somewhere. We don't know where. So there's some interesting stuff there that could be answered more or expounded on. They're described as degenerating. So we know that they were human just 26 years ago. So it's impressive to have that degree of mutation in that period of time, to the point that they're short, they're hunched, they're stocky, but have really amplified strength to the degree of super mutants. Their face and limbs are really bloated, thick. Their eyes bulge.
Their eyes bulge? I don't know that I've seen their eyes.
Yeah. The reason that all of this started is I started researching mole miners for a horror story that I'm writing for the end of the month. That's not going to be a Chad story. Our writers group is doing horror tales set in Appalachia. So this one's a little serious. But when I started reading into them, it was just casually thrown out there, something that blew my mind, that the mole miners have dialogue lines. Like actual lines that a voice actor read the script and then went,
yeah.
Oh my God, it got up my ass. I don't even know what's going on right now. Please don't shoot me.
I could tell what you said that time.
Well, I'm not a professional voice actor. Not like, I'm sure that was all Wes Johnson. Oh, we lost Lainey.
Oh no, she'll come back. Don't worry. She's got bad internet sometimes.
Hang on, chat.
Yep, she's back.
There we go.
Itself opened.
We got you back.
Tom Hardy's. Yeah, they should all sound like Tom Hardy's Bane.
Hey, Batman. Hey, get out of my mind. I will
Bane the
murder
mole
you.
miner.
Yeah.
I see you have some script there, Mr. Voltola Man. Does it give you power over me? I was born in the back, Batman. Give me your script.
Anyway.
I'm going to give you a furious rolling pin.
We could do this all day.
We could.
All right. So they have actual lines.
Yep. So with the help of the data miners, because I'd read that in the wiki, I saw what the lines were, but I wanted to go back to the original source. So we dug into the files, found all of the actual sound files for their dialogue, and then we found in the files the EDIDs that had script notations that are right in the game files in terms of what the file matches up to. So using that, we were able to match the audio clips with the actual script. And once you do that, once you hear it and you know what you're looking for, you can make out what they're saying a little easier than just the screaming. Some of the most interesting dialogue was their idle dialogue, and that includes...
Which is all about Batman.
It is.
Sorry, go on.
It includes the line, "Need to keep digging, we'll find it soon. Can't wait until another surfacer shows up. The green men, blind as all the rest in the tunnels. Gotta keep the claws sharp. The blue suits just want to tear them into pieces."
All right, so wait. Can we pause here?
Yeah.
The green men, those have to be super mutants, right? If they get the super mutants
Actually,
down...
I looked into it.
What did you find?
So, well, according to the wiki, at least, even in it, because it has some of these quotes, it has, the links to what they are. And specifically, it was one kind of super mutant, but it is a super mutant.
Right.
And then the blue suits, that vault dwellers.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
It could be vault dwellers, but I think there's something more to it. And when we get to the end of this story, we'll come back to why I think the color is important.
Right.
Now, in order to match these up, one of the interesting things with those lines, those entries are marked 0009. And the EDID sequence for all of the game files is fairly consistent in terms of its numbering scheme. So all of the new stuff, the stuff that came out with Wastelanders and even since, starts with 005 for the most part. The older stuff is 0013 or 0009. Those lines, particularly the one "Need to keep digging, we'll find it soon," was an entry marked 0009 6A54. I couldn't find the actual audio clip that was linked to. So even though it's scripted in the game files, there's no matching audio clip that's in the game files, which means that either it was never recorded, or it was discarded, or it's part of cut content. Speaking of the cut content, and this may be what it's linked to, last year there was a video that popped up on YouTube that was a leak that showed a mole miner underground city. That's actually a pretty impressive looking structure. It's basically buildings, buses, some shacks built underground, believe, collapsed tunnels and ruins. There's a Red Rocket garage down there. That entire area is marked as a test cell. So it
What does that
either
mean?
the test cell could have been from pre-development. So as developers were developing the game, creating these test cells just to plop characters into to play around with stuff, or
Right.
it could also be content that hasn't happened yet and maybe we'll get at some point. It is a really cool space. In the show notes.
Well, we do know that there's like a underground car network thing going on with like the Raiders, and is this connected to that maybe?
This isn't connected to that. But I think the mother lode, the tunnels in which that she digs through, gives them great access to move around Appalachia, probably following in its tails, just kind of moving through the tunnels and expanding them on their own. The environment down there would be really, really cool for some of the new daily ops to have mole miners as a variant. I think we talked about that, you and I, how cool that would be to have like ridiculously overpowered mole miners that we fight, particularly in that space, because it's one that nobody's really seen aside from that video.
Yeah, I could imagine like an entire, like we're talking, if this was a fantasy game, I mean, it's fantasy, but if this was a typical fantasy game, they would be the dwarves or something, right? This would be like evil dwarves who are like mining, delving into the earth and creating these really cool structures. But I mean, this could be the Fallout equivalent of something like that. They could have some sort of palace with like ridiculous things and all the things they collect from the surface and bring down there.
Yeah, it's, if you think about it too, there's also some interesting science fiction parallels with them. If you're a fan of H.G. Wells, the Time Machine novel, and even the George Pal film, which is one of my favorite films of all time, it's a great story showcasing what happens when humans live underground for too long and kind of de-evolve into these kind of mindless monstrosities that are super violent. It's the George Pal Time Machine movie is really excellent, Chad. If you ever want to see something that's very Fallout-like with its weird retrofuturism. There's the treasure hunter mole miners. I started to think, once I found this out, I thought, well, geez, does Mother Murmurg have voice dialogue? And if so, is she saying something like,
"Get the fuck out of my store! I hate you kids."
Stuff like that?
"I love when you visit me, Batman. Bring me my script."
I think that's from now on. That's my headcanon. Every time I visit her, that's what she's saying.
"From Appalachia, I'm going to free you now."
Yeah, so I started to wonder if they had dialogue, and then I started going down a really upsetting path. If you remember the Treasure Hunter Mole Miner event, Hunter mole miners just kind of
treasure muncher
are just kind of wandering around. You find them because they're making a racket and they're broadcasting Morse code. They're passive, like they don't.
Yeah, and they try to run away.
Right, they're like just running, and you don't know what they're saying. So my fear is that they were like translated. They were saying something like, "Oh God, please, I'm just trying to help you," or "Leave me alone, please don't kill me," or something like that. Which were just about.
I'm trying to get back to the deck, Batman. Leave me alone.
Yeah, and in response,
Yeah.
I say, I really need a circus car in my camp, so I need to murder you for it.
Yes, I need to murder you for my circus car.
That's-
Yes, justified murder.
That's
I don't know
capitalism
any
at
other
its
reason.
best right there, kids.
Yes, yes. Mhm.
So
Yeah, buying things with other people's lives.
So we looked into it, and the treasure hunters and Mother Murmur actually don't have any voiced dialogue that's revealed in the files. So at least that's something. It would have been interesting if she did. Maybe that's something we'll get eventually. But there are 9 variants of mole miners, and then there are some extras that actually haven't been unlocked yet. So we have the regular mole miner, we have the scrapper, the digger, the rock breaker, the foreman, the supervisor, the glowing, the scorched, and then the treasure hunter one. The ones that were added with the vault raids that were cut, that are still there, but they're just not in game, are the mole miner scrapper, or sapper rather, dredger, skull crusher, and deadly.
Skull crusher.
But the deadly one is just,
Deadly.
it's got like 5 arms or something. Possibly a rolling pin.
I want. Okay. My want for these is for them to evolve in like really weird, grotesque ways. So like some of them have their pickaxes just fused to their arms, or like they just become more and more the thing that they seem to be turning into.
I think a great endgame boss would be if they like merge together like a transformer.
If you have like multiple inside a minecart, so it's like, part minecart, part multiple mole miners.
Yeah, I was thinking like
perfect, yeah.
construction equipment, like a bulldozer. Like they've like merged themselves into the kinds of equipment that you would use for tunneling. Like one of them has like a drill on it, and all of a sudden we're at like Big Daddy's from BioShock or something. But like, yeah.
Mole miner Voltron.
Mole miner, here you go, Mole miner Voltron, or the Constructicons. Remember the Constructicons?
Yeah. Those were badass.
Yeah.
So they, as far as their dialogue, there are multiple categories of what their lines actually are. They have lines for when they get wounded or hit, such as, "Ugh, that all you got. Ugh, I'll kill you for that," and variations of that. When they're in combat, they say stuff like "now, there, kill, fucking kill all of you. I'll peel off all your skin, snap every bone in your body." It gets worse from here. Some of their lines are pretty graphic.
Warning.
Their normal behavior. So if they just if you go into stealth or they miss you, they'll say things like "nothing, it's over," "damn, got away," or "next time." They have lines for being alerted, such as "what, something, huh?" Losing the combatant over here, won't take long. When they go from combat to normal behavior, meaning they've killed you, they say things like, "yeah, that's right," and "stay dead," "that's it, die," or "that's all." Their alert idle lines are things like "I'll find you," "can't hide forever," "come out." From here is where it gets pretty specific. They have friendships, so allies that they're actually bonded to. If you kill the ally, they'll say some really graphic stuff, such as "you'll fucking pay for that," "he or she is dead, now you're dead," "one more reason to kill you," or "you're next." So the fact that they have...
So they bond. They actually have
So the fact that they have like allied relationships is in a way even more upsetting. Like you killed their friend or, a loved one. And they're like coming at you with this violent rage.
I wonder if those are lasting like relationships that they had before they were mutated in the same way that they still have some of their belongings on them.
Or if they are still self-aware enough to be building relationships, even though we know, even though ghouls, unless they're feral ghouls just act like crazy zombies, right? But ghouls act like normal people. They're very mutated, but in their brains, at least for their basic brain chemistry, still works the same. They relate to other people just like they normally would. they also tend to be a little bit grumpy because they're uncomfortable. Their bodies don't feel good. You know, like there's kind of grumpy. This seems like if you were to take that to the next extreme and, you know, take a mutated person and stuff them into a suit and merge them with their suit, and they're uncomfortable and hot and they can't get out of it, and it's part of who they are, and you know, and everything sucks, but they still are kind of just doing what they need to do to survive and get along with the people around them. It's like there's still a person in there, just a very angry person.
Yeah, the more I dug into this, the more it changes how you view them, and like I can't help but think about it now every time I kill one. So they have taunting lines that are actually some of the most dialogue variety that they had, and some of these are pretty terrifying. In a way, it's almost good that you can't make out what they say. Things like tear your face in half, line the tunnels with your bones, never see the light again, break every fucking bone you have, dig straight into your eyes, I'll claw your teeth out. What the actual?
I don't usually think about clawing teeth out, but all right.
Or I'll drag you into hell.
All right.
No, thank you.
Okay.
They have melee specific dialogue, which is the only variety of dialogue based on the weapon that they're holding. The melee ones also have pretty graphic dialogue. Tear you apart, spread your guts on the floor. Let's hear your bones snap. How do you like me up close? I don't.
How do you like me up close?
I don't want to.
That's what the lady at the bar said.
When you're screaming and running at me. Thank you very much. Jesus Christ. So that's kind of what they are. So then I started looking into really thinking about why they are the way they are. And one of the biggest questions that I had, if they're still human, they domesticate animals, they have a social structure, they have a hierarchy where they still recognize a supervisor or roles that they have. Why are they so violent on site? And this is where we get into some interesting real life stuff. So in 1972, a doctor named Michel Sifra spent 6 months in Midnight Cave in Texas. His experiment was to determine how long-term living in a cave would affect you from a physical and mental state.
Is this the one where they figured out that your actual sleep cycle isn't 24 hours?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm familiar with this. Yeah.
So it's the isolation and sensory deprivation had a rapid impact on his physical and mental health. It only took a few weeks in that darkness before he started contemplating suicide. And by the 77th day, his memory had deteriorated to such a degree that he lost his short-term memory. He had to write everything down. After the 6 months was up and he emerged from his experience, he was left with lasting long-term memory lapses, decreased eyesight, and other psychological issues. He suffered from back and joint pain, with his back and shoulders visibly drooped. Sensory deprivation in particular can lead to visual, oral, and tactile hallucinations, as recorded during another 1954 study that was done by McGill University.
Yeah, it's like your brain is constantly looking for stimulus, and if it doesn't get it, it'll make it for itself.
This is even worse than that, because on top of being subjected, that was 6 months. We're talking decades.
Right.
That's terrifying. On top of the fact that you're locked in this suit that's fused to you. So like you said, you're uncomfortable.
Right.
You've got
imagine constantly being in pain.
It's a fucking nightmare. It's terrible.
Yeah. A lot of people will get to a certain point in their life where they are in some form of constant pain due to medical issues and things, and often older adults, so this is something that they will talk about, like constantly being in pain. And the idea, like I suffer migraines, I have headaches all the time. When I'm going through that, I am almost non-functional, but can you imagine, like, that's just in your normal state, is just constant, not just being uncomfortable, but like in pain, like really just, I don't know, isolated, put in a suit, uncomfortable, hot, probably mutated in some way. You're just like, oh, all of that together. No wonder they're going to be angry and mad at everybody.
There's
Violent.
also, you think too about the tactile impact. Because of COVID-19, a lot of us went for quite a while, if not still, where, especially with parents who maybe have some health complications, you can't hug them, or you stay away from them for a while. And as people, we want that tactile touch. We want to be held and hugged, and we want to touch people or put a reassuring hand on a friend. They can't do any of that. So on top of this is just a living nightmare state.
Right. They did a study with dogs, with petting a dog on the head, like behind the ears, just rubbing a dog's head. And they showed that you and the dog both release the same chemicals in your brain when you do this, that increase your mood, make you happy, reduce your blood pressure. Like the positive benefit of just simply touching a dog is amazingly beneficial to both the human and the dog. Now, imagine that's touching another human. You can imagine that would be better than touching a dog, like the need for hug, that like these are all physiological needs. These are not just emotional things where you feel like, oh, I was a child, I needed hugs, now I'm an adult, so because I grew up needing hugs, I still need hugs. No, you physically are designed in a way where your body responds biologically to this. And if you remove it, then you're removing those biological triggers from your brain altogether. So yes, that is very much a thing.
Chat, I think oxytocin is the one that you're talking about. I think you're right. Yeah, the bonding
Yeah, it is
hormone.
oxytocin.
Yep. Good call.
Yeah, but it's part of the natural, regular way that your brain needs to function. And if you don't get certain chemicals in your brain, then you start to fall apart.
Another effect of long-term cave living has to do with oxygen. On July 2nd, 2018, rescuers reached that stranded soccer team in Thailand that had gone missing in the Tam Luang caves. They were in there for just 10 days. And while oxygen generally isn't an issue, even deep underground, because it flows in through limestone, which is porous as well as cracks, contaminants are often found in the air that cause long-term lung issues. Carbon dioxide buildup, dust, ash, even animal feces can emit ammonia into the air, as well as fungal spores, all of which damage the lungs. So if people live down there, trapped for decades in their mining gear, literally fused into it, coming to the surface and inhaling pure air after decades of that, relying on their ventilators, removing that ventilator would be an immediate shock to the system, perhaps enough to kill. And the PTS recently dropped us some new more minor lore. And this is a little bit of a spoiler, so you can turn away for the next 5 minutes.
Spoilers.
We're getting some updates with the Enclave and Brotherhood with this new update, which I'm really excited about. This particular entry came from the Enclave Research Division regarding Subject B/06. It reads, I almost pity this one. The scouts recovered 2 of them from Welch. We suspect they were once the residents. They do appear to have a moderate amount of intelligence. However, upon the removal of the respiration device on one subject, it suffocated almost instantly. Further study may be worthwhile.
Wow.
So that was kind of a cool update to Mole Miner lore, and I hope we get more of that.
Oh yeah, I could imagine an entire expansion at some point.
So that's that's what they are. So there's been, since the beginning of the game, there's been some really wild theories. And I wanted to kind of round up some of those before I explain what I think the origin of the mole miners is. Some of the theories include that they were children who had worked in the mines, which is why when you loot them, they often have toys. While children working in mines was a real problem in the 19th and early part of the 20th century, particularly in Appalachia, I don't think it's that at all. Another theory had to do with them being inbred pre-war Appalachians who lived in caves. I don't think it's that either. I think once again it's that awful Elijah Dushku
stereotype,
Dushku movie that came out there. Another one is that the Enclave ended up creating them by splicing their DNA with mole rats, hence the name. I don't think it's that either.
No.
Another one is that they could be personnel from Vault 63, which is in the right area. That perhaps that vault didn't work as intended. That was part of the vault raids. We never ever got into Vault 63. So the thought, one person thought they maybe dug their way out and became mutated in the process. The mole miners that I mentioned earlier that were cut content were supposed to be part of that raid. As part of that, some of the cut content there's you have to locate a fireman, engineer, or an officer in there as part of that vault raid. So I don't know if the point of that vault was just for firemen, engineers, officer, maybe civil servants. Maybe that's what the purpose of that population was, but we don't know at this point, and maybe eventually that vault will open and we'll get some more lore about it.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
Here's what I think the backstory of the mole miners are. So in our history, the coal wars of the late 19th and early 20th century was a really violent labor uprising, and the Battle of Blair Mountain being the largest armed uprising since the Civil War. And if you're really interested in a lot of this history, Widgeon TV that we've had on, I'm a huge fan of his videos. He did a great video series digging into kind of the backstory of the coal wars and how the lore of Fallout 76 ties into some of that. In Fallout, this same uprising stemmed from the automation riots, with automation coming in and atomic mining services switching from traditional labor over to Robco robots. As AMS started hunting down the ultrasite that they discovered, they forced families out of Welch in October of 2077, so just before the Great War, after discovering an ultrasite vein underneath there. After that, the miners rallied together, started setting up roadblocks and arming themselves. AMS, corporate enforcers, and the National Guard were called in, as was a fleet of Robco Striker Breaker robots paid for by the Hornwrights, and they started using lethal force on the miners to put them down. In Charleston, the bloodiest battle took place at the Poseidon Energy Plant WV-06 that had been cold-fired since the 70s, but refitted to burn ultrasite leased from AMS. The corporate and government influence that they had there and general unrest caused a walkout with staff. They wanted a contract. They wanted, long-term job security because they saw what happened to the miners. The Associated Miners Union backed them and helped them to organize their protests. The plant security manager, Brent Olson, used the ultrasite as an excuse for the National Guard to be called in under the guise that it was a national security issue. So the National Guard shows up. The plan was put in place to deal with them permanently. They wanted to end organized labor and turn the media and general public in their favor. So they planned to use hallucinogen gas on the picketers, making them turn on each other violently, that triggering a riot. Unfortunately, what they didn't plan on was that the mob, when they turned violent, turned on the soldiers and the plant itself, tearing off the soldiers' masks. The soldiers, too, succumbed to the gas. It ended in a bloodbath, and the Great War happened shortly thereafter. To talk a little bit about hallucinogen, we had to go back to Fallout 4. And when you go into hallucinogen to when you're going into that building and part of that quest, it's designed, or it was designed, for riot pacification. It's a type 2 frag grenade. The interesting thing is what happened in testing. So in testing, 2 out of 5 people were injured by the explosion itself. 1 was seriously. 5 out of 5 suffered traumatic adrenal gland rupture due to gas exposure, leading to hallucinations, erratic behavior, and increased aggression, prone to frenzies. 4 out of 5 of them were killed in the ensuing melee. So they were put in a room and they all beat each other to death. 1 in 5 died due to heart failure. It says, similar to previous tests, that the concentration required for wide era dispersal, massive adrenaline surges occur. Recommend revisiting the chemical substrate. October 18th, 2077, right around the time that the riot would have occurred at Poseidon, was a notation that the gas still causes traumatic adrenal gland rupture and frenzy in 4 out of 5 subjects after adjustment. One survived initial exposure and began to acclimate before being beaten to death by the other subjects. Other subjects regressed. We suggest adjusting dosage and retesting. So we have
it's pretty on the nose then for some of the activity.
Well, yeah, you've got all of these workers, miners that are coming to help out. So you have this large crowd, hallucinogen gas being dispersed there, as well as other parts of Appalachia on the citizens. So I think the Great War happens. The miners and the pre-war civilians that are still under the long-term effects of hallucinogen gas fled into the mines. It would make sense for them to flee underground with the exposure to radiation from ultrasonic mining as well as nuclear fallout. They had nothing but their suits and respirator gear, so they develop a society still underground best they can, still human but deformed and still feeling the effects of hallucinogens. So they're prone to violence, frenzy, even though between that and long-term cave exposure where you're losing your short-term memory, they still retain enough of themselves to recognize friendship and family and animals and all of that, but they would still have an immediate and deep-seated reaction to uniforms, particularly law enforcement or army personnel or robots.
Right.
Simply from everything that they went through before. So I think that partially explains some of their immediate violent freakouts.
Well, and after 2.5 decades of relying only on people who look like them,
right,
and only being able to trust themselves, and then coming out to the outside world and seeing other people and encroaching on their land. I mean, think about it. You're on some quest doing something you think you're doing in some abandoned mine or whatever, and really you're encroaching on their home.
I think that
and you're coming in with weapons.
Right.
Go ahead, Lane.
I think that also that could tie back into the blue suits that they talk about. We speculated that could be right. It could be the vault dwellers, but what if it's actually just policemen?
I think
police officers.
And even if it isn't the vault dwellers, I think they would be triggered maybe by the color blue. In sensory deprivation, you actually become colorblind as a short-term result, but eventually you get that back. So even if they lost their ability to perceive color, they would eventually get that back enough to see the color blue, have this deep-seated reaction and memory, and act accordingly. Even if none of that were true, what happened when they came to the surface would also explain kind of their immediate violent behavior towards us. So, the Great War is over. Decades pass. They come back to the surface, and they meet the Appalachian Enclave, who emerges from the bunker and goes out and starts doing patrols before 2086, sometime between when the Enclave started doing routes and really categorizing and cataloging things in the area. They meet the mole miners and had probably not a very great reaction to them. The fire breathers encountered them on March 10th, 2095. The way that this happened is kind of sad. So the fire breathers, part of the new responders, you said from the 5-0, the responders, they received a report that there was a group of unidentified people in the area that were over in Brim Quarry. And just the fact that they were there was making people nervous. So they hadn't done anything. They hadn't bothered any settlers, hurt anybody, anything like that. So the fire breathers are sent out. Here they are, they're armed, they're ready to fight. Lieutenant Thomas is a fire lieutenant in Charleston. Before the Great War, he joined the fire breathers afterward. He led the team into Brim Quarry. They immediately attacked the unidentified enemies. Garrett on their squad was killed. He was only 20 years old and died trying to save his squad. They buried him nearby. He described them in the action report that can be found in Room 40. It reads that we encountered moderate numbers of, well, we aren't sure what to make of them. They appear to be bipeds wearing those old heavy miner suits. They grunt and shriek like monsters, but we find wallets, keys, watches. I don't know if I'll ever understand all the horrors of this new world. They killed all of the mole miners. And he closed the report by saying, like other reports indicate, they don't seem to feel or care about anything. They can't be human, at least not anymore. So the way in which that's worded is kind of telling. They were looked at as monsters, and even the fact that they weren't bothering anybody, it's kind of like this is like a typical 1950s horror scenario in which a monster doesn't do anything, but the universe and society is so totally against them that they end up making them into the monster.
Right. That's, I mean, that is one of the messages from those early horror movies is that if humanity doesn't understand a thing, we kill it.
Right.
That our response to the thing that we don't understand or can't fit into our worldview is it must be destroyed, reject it, get it out of here. Which that relates directly to. Yeah.
Which is still a problem in modern times.
Yep.
Later on, we find, before Wastelanders, we find that one final haunting holotape from the Overseer at Mountainside Bed and Breakfast. And in it, she's been critically wounded. She has no supplies left, ironically enough. And she's kind of there bleeding out, leaving her last holotape. And she'd been attacked by a mole miner right on site. So if you take all of that, if you think about these former miners who were shot, shelled, gassed, and attacked by people in uniform and robots, still, after 26 years, they come back to the surface and they're still dealing with that. Of course, they're going to be violent to us on site. Knowing all of that, I started to think too about one final upsetting realization that I just have to subject you to.
Okay, so all of this comes down to this, right? Okay.
It comes down to this.
Go on.
Uranium fever. So we know that they have a city of some kind. They live underground. When you think of uranium fever, if you stop and think for a minute about what that event really is, once nothing happens until you trigger the mining equipment to start mining again. They tunnel up from below or from side tunnels. And if you watch, their primary motivation seems to be to destroy the drilling equipment. So the question is, why do they care about the drilling equipment? They don't attack equipment anywhere else. They do attack you if you start raiding the mother lode and taking stuff from it that, they could think of as theirs, that you're taking their property, but it doesn't make sense for them to destroy equipment. They don't really do that anywhere else. So
unless they're trying to protect something,
which is my point. So in our casual act of harvesting materials, what if we're actually drilling down into their city, killing their children and their families, and they're just up here trying to shut down the equipment? So on that final,
or just protect us from discovering it. I mean, it could be as simple as that.
Yeah, it could be that too. But either way, it's upsetting. So congratulations. You'll never look at them the same way again. I know I don't.
Congratulations. Yeah. So Lainey's still very new in the game. She hasn't actually gotten to experience running into them, but now she's going to be very well equipped to feel terrible about herself when she snipes them in the head. So congratulations. You have that to look forward to. She's just nodding. She's like, yep. Cool. Well, that thank you for digging into that. That was a lot of really cool histories and concepts all kind of pulled together to help us understand what it is we might be actually running into in this game. I know a lot of people who listen to the Fallout Lorecast haven't necessarily tried 76. It's a lot better than it was when it launched. I've been having a ton of fun. I took a big break after playing it for a few months when it launched, but I'm back and I'm regularly playing it now all the time. It is It is a very good game, and if you enjoyed things like Fallout 4 and the lore behind the stuff going on in the world, it's a lot of the same types of stuff, some of the same writers. There's a lot to it, and it's very enjoyable. So, if you're still on the fence, maybe wait to get it on sale, but I don't think you're going to be disappointed. I think that this is turning into an amazing game with a lot of potential as the future continues to roll out new content.
Yeah, and just even Tex in chat, we had so much fun last Friday digging into in PTS, trying to figure out, because there's new content in the game, but it's not linked to anything yet, so we don't know what it is or what the story is going to be there. But some really amazing lore building on the Enclave and the Brotherhood, and even I have to compliment. I don't know if Ferret wrote the Mole Miners or if somebody else did, but the way in which these characters have been written makes them some of the most unique new characters that we've had added to Fallout in a while now. Especially after kind of digging into all of that, when you think about their backstory and their kind of tragic lore.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, we already have feral ghouls, which are the equivalent of something like zombies, and we already have robots that can be programmed to attack us. So outside of those and like Nazis, like what else do you put in a game that you feel justified in having to fight, or monsters, but giving us something like the Mole Miners that are kind of this gray area where you go, I have to defend myself. I need to go do the quest down there, and there's things I want. But at the same time, are these really people? Is there a moral reason I shouldn't be fighting against them? And that's a great thing to develop in a game, because it puts you in that's where games like Fallout really shine the most, is in the gray areas. And it's wonderful to have an enemy potentially who, and maybe not, in some cases, Mama Merg isn't a bad guy. You don't want to shoot her in the face. You want to turn in your script and get your legendary. So, there's a lot more potential in these in between types of situations and dilemmas than in just like, oh, there's a monster, kill it.
With the treasure hunters coming back as well, we can all feel like monsters again.
Yes, yeah, I enjoyed that. That was fun. We grouped up when that was doing it and killed some of those guys, and yeah, you feel kind of bad chasing them around because they just run away. But you got to get that legendary boxing glove that gives you +1 perception or whatever. Well, cool.
I still have to kill them because the if anybody has pails, the loot table has been updated from them. So a lot of the new stuff that you can't get yet, like some of the really cool outfits, are part of that loot table. So people have been opening the Mole Miner pails, and I'm gonna have to kill them.
I'm gonna have to kill them all. Awesome. Well, we're getting close to the end of the show here. We have to say thank you to everybody who helps support the show, helps promote us on social media, who leaves reviews. I don't bring this up on every episode of the Fallout Hub. This is something I regularly mention on the Fallout Lorecast. But for both shows, if you are a supporter on any of my shows on Patreon, or if you are even just somebody who shows up in the live streams and helps tell your friends about the shows, we really do appreciate it. It helps us get the word out that there are some awesome Fallout shows out there for you to listen to and enjoy together. So thank you to everybody who helps support the shows. If you're interested in supporting the Fallout Lorecast, you can go to our Patreon, patreon.com/Fallout Lorecast. In a future episode, I will be reading out some of the ratings and reviews that we got over the last month, and welcoming our new patrons from last month, which I will do on the next episode. And if you're interested in supporting the Fallout Hub, you guys know where to find us every week. Come hang out with us. Tell your friends, leave a rating, a review. And if you want to support the shows in financial ways, then there are always our sponsors, including audiobooks.com. So if you're interested in listening to any book, and believe me, I've looked, I've been searching all these different books. They have so much, and we are giving you 3 free books from audiobooks.com. All you have to do is click the link in the show notes, and you can go just sign up and download them. You don't have to pay any money. It's just free. 3 books, and if you like it, you can stay subscribed and get new books every month, and if not, you can just get the 3 ones for free, and there you go. So super awesome deal.
There's some really great ones in there, like I Married a Teenage Mole Miner. That's a great read.
I Married a Teenage Mole Miner. I'm sure you could find classics though, like Journey to the Center of the Earth and those kinds of things that we actually referenced on the show today.
Time Machine.
Yeah, Time Machine, any of that stuff. Lots of really good stuff there. So go check that out. It's in the links on the show notes. And if you're not able to see the show notes for whatever reason, or look underneath the player and the YouTube video or whatever, then shoot us a note on the Patreon and just say, hey, can I get one of the links for the things, and I'll share it with you. It's easy to get. And that also brings up the Patreon. Come talk with us on the Robots Radio Patreon. We love having new people jump in all the time talking about Fallout stuff. Our Patreon is super busy. Lots of awesome people sharing pictures and their experiences and playing games together and those kinds
You
of
mean
things.
the Discord?
On the Discord. That's the word. Discord. I was still on Patreon. I mean the Discord. This is why Lainey is helping me out with shows from now on. In other news, on the Fallout Lorecast this month, we are tackling cryptids, and we will have Dave Chaffins, who isn't here this week because he's said he was going out leap peeping.
That's
and
the
I don't know what that
story,
means.
But, really, I think
I don't know how he
Dave
got
is
out of the vault.
He's looking for cryptids.
That's what it is. He somehow escaped the vaults through that secret door somewhere that you guys are using. I'm the only one who hasn't left recently, and is looking for cryptids. He'll be back with me and Lainey next week to talk about cryptids. We'll be talking about different cryptids every week this month after this episode. And what else do you have going on, Ken?
That's it. A lot of writing.
More Chad episodes coming out. A lot of writing.
A lot of
fun. A lot of fun videos.
I'm writing, that, and I'm writing 2 episodes concurrently. Yeah, at the end of the month, I'm really excited. We've got a few unique live streams that we're doing. We're doing a drive-in. So the cast and I will be doing some horror movie drive-ins. That'll be fun. We're going to watch some of the worst horror movies ever made.
Yeah. Yeah, we're swapping shows. This is something we're doing on the Robots Radio Network. Some of the shows are going to be trading shows. I'm working out an episode that I think I'll be doing of the Omega broadcast. Ooh. Where I'm not gonna. It's gonna be silly. But anyway,
if it's not Buddy Bot's Adventures in Appalachia, I'm not listening.
Oh my god! I was thinking. Don't tell. I mean, he's in the chat. I can't reveal my secret plan. But yeah, that would be amazing. Maybe I'll just do that. That would be great. So yeah, Buddy Bot.
And then I was exploring the mountains of Appalachia.
Yeah, a good one, Buddy Bot.
Yeah. MJ Tanner was just asking what we're watching. We're gonna watch Deathbed, the Bed That Eats. That's a real corker.
It's a real good movie.
We're also gonna watch Alice, Sweet Alice, which is another really weird
good movie. Hey, so speaking of mole miners, if ever you decide to add a mole miner character to Chad, I want to be able to do the voice, and I'll voice it like Bane.
Hey, Batman.
I think that would be a great addition to the show. Anyway, that's it for us. Thank you guys for tuning in, and Deathbed is amazing. Mr. MJ Tanner knows.
Really, it's a mess. The cast hasn't seen it, so they're in for a real treat.
Awesome. Yeah, so stay tuned and check out some of the other shows on the Robots Radio Network. We've got a bunch of awesome shows, including a bunch of Fallout shows. And we'll be swapping shows near the end of this month for Halloween. We're putting on costumes and wearing each other's shows. It's going to be awesome. All right, guys. Thank you for tuning in as usual. Thank you for being here for the live chat. And thank you for listening with your ear holes. And we will talk to you next time. Until next time, don't get stuck in a miner suit and, have hallucinogens and mutate with radiation and then say mean things.
And remember, Mama Murmurmurg needs love too.
She needs love too. She loves those baconless cookies. If you meet a mysterious malt miner at a bar late at night with a bowling pin and cookies, tell her hi for us. All right. See you guys later.
Yeah.
Bye. I got to do the Dave wave.